I love learning, and I think learning is super important. I'm a big fan of education in the main. I'm constantly, personally, reading books, listening to philosophers, theologians, all manner of other more regular people to discuss ideas in history and philosophy and theology. I think it is, again, really, really important. I studied classics, like actual classics of ancient Rome and Greece in undergraduate, and then got a Masters of Divinity in New Testament and Biblical Greek. And I don't say all of that to toot my own horn. It doesn't matter to me. All of the letters and different qualifications don't matter that much to me because there are many, many people who are way smarter than me and have more degrees and letters. My point is education is really, really important. More and more, though, I'm concerned over what people are learning, or really where people are learning and where we're sending our children. Of course, we talk a lot about that here in elementary school and primary school. What are educators teaching? What are administrations trying to teach to your children? This is really, really important. I think it's one of the most important things because what you learn shapes who you are, what you believe, how you act in this world. And that's what we talk about here at Church Public. How are you going to act in this world? How are you going to know what is right and what is wrong and what you're supposed to do? So today we're looking to higher education and some of the weirdness in college, etc. And while there are tons of stories that we could tell, I just want to focus on 3 quick stories today. There are numerous large seminaries that are either closing or moving entirely to small buildings to try to stay alive. There were once biblical institutions becoming pluralistic mush. And finally, some places, and fortunately, some places are pushing back and hopefully maintaining ground. Welcome to Church Public. I'm Matt Odegaard. Welcome back to Church Public. I really appreciate you stopping by today. If you haven't already, like and share and subscribe. Give a 5-star review on Apple or Google. It really makes a difference as we're trying to get the word out about this podcast so that people understand, as I mentioned, how to live in this world. How do you follow Jesus and how do you live in this world? Those are really the important things that I want you to take home with you today from wherever you are and wherever you're figuring out how to live in this world. That's the goal. The goal is, what do you do? We talked about yesterday or 2 days ago. One of the things that I'm seeing is this culture says you can have faith, but you can only have faith in your house or maybe at your church. Anywhere in between your house and your church, you're not allowed to have faith. You can't go out and proclaim the gospel. You can't read the Bible in school. You can't pray in school. You can't read the Bible or pray at your workplace. You can't share the Bible or prayer or any religious affiliation in the grocery store or in the marketplace or in politics, especially. We talked about a candidate, Mastriano, that shared his idea about faith, his belief that God will bless those who follow after God, and how that's not okay. It's not allowed to share that you have a personal faith, that you follow after a faith. Those things aren't allowed anymore. You're not allowed to live out a faith anywhere other than, again, probably in your home where no one can see you because that's the secret place of your home, and maybe at church, as long as you don't do anything in between those 2 places, right? Those are the things that we're getting to in this culture. The culture says this freedom of religion thing, that doesn't really mean freedom of religion. It doesn't really mean the free expression of religion anywhere. It just means in your house you're free to express your religion, or maybe at church you're free to express your religion, but everywhere else not free to express your religion. It's not okay at all. But that is antithetical, one, to just religion, period, whether you are a Christian, Muslim, Jew, etc. If you are a religious person, then you are a religious person. This whole compartmentalization, and it even gets back to the question we talked about the other day, where with the documentary and some of my reflections on it. You can go listen to that at churchpublic.com or any of the podcast places that we're segmenting ourselves into all these little compartments where you can have a religious part of your life and a gender part of your life and all these other different parts of your life, but you can't have a holistic person of just who you are, or as in biblical Christian terms, who God made you to be as a person. That's why God says, it's what Jesus says, love and God. Love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. You notice that encompasses everything. It encompasses all of the things within you, because you're not supposed to be this weird compartmentalized person. You're supposed to be a person who is a person, and you take who you are where you go. And that's how you were designed and that's how you're supposed to be. But now we're told that no, you have to compartmentalize yourself because we don't want to see any of that other shenanigans. And that is where we get to where we are today. So, a couple of the stories that I came across that I think are interesting have to do with education and have to do with where you're allowed to have faith or not so much, and what's happening in our education, because I think it's important that, like, one, you can go back and look to Bible and biblical worldview that we talk about a lot, like train up your child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. And that call to parents that we're supposed to educate our children in all things, not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? But all things, including and especially, we talk about this here a lot, parents are in charge of the moral formation of their children. They're supposed to teach right from wrong. They're supposed to teach good from evil and show these things to their children. But by and large, some parents have just offloaded that either to the schools, which, by the way, is a terrible idea, or even to the churches, which sounds like a good idea. But what is that, an hour a week? That's just not enough to actually teach morals, to actually teach right from wrong. It should be really a daily thing that you at least talk about or brush up against as you have conversations with your children. These are the important things that you should be doing as a parent. And if that sounds overwhelming, it's because it kind of is. But at the same time, that's the part of being a parent. You're constantly overwhelmed. And that's okay. You just do the best you can. I'm not condemning anybody. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just saying, start now. Start doing these things. Don't give up. Don't give in. Don't have despair. Just do it. Do whatever you can. Do the best that you can. That's the goal of what you're supposed to do as you follow after God. So you get to these places, and here's where I want to get into the higher learning, because I've been trying to figure out what in the world is going on with higher education. And as I mentioned, there's a lot going on, and in colleges and universities and seminaries, there's a lot of weird things going on. So I'm not going to talk about all of those today, but I did see a couple of stories, and I want to look at a couple of these stories as we figure out what is going on in higher education. So Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, which is an enormous seminary in Massachusetts. I'm looking here. It's 102 acres of campus. That's really big, right? And they've had thousands of students over the years, and even somewhat recently, but that amount of students has just gone lower and lower and lower. I think it's almost half of what it used to be just a few years ago. So they announced, according to Christianity Today and some other publications, New York Times, they've announced that they're going to sell, or they plan to sell most, if not all, of that enormous campus in Massachusetts, the 102 acres, to try to survive financially. And it's a really interesting, it's a really sad statement. So people aren't going to seminary. And I've known this for a long time, actually. I rattled off some random things that I've done in my education career. And several years ago now, I thought about pursuing a doctorate and going into a professorship and teaching and doing some other things. And I had a mentor professor talk to me and say, you can, but let me tell you that there will be no professor jobs, or it will be very hard. There's a lot of professor PhDs out there and not very many jobs. And this is one of the reasons that people just aren't going to schools. They aren't going to seminaries. They aren't going to places. And I went a different direction with some of my education, and that's fine. But it's important to understand that this is a trend, and it's a weird trend, and really, to me, it's kind of a sad trend. Are people not following after God? Are they not interested in learning? Are they not interested in learning about God? And there are some reasons for this, and we'll look at a couple of those. But it's important to pay attention to these things. And Gordon Conwell is not alone. There's many other places like Trinity Evangelical Divinity School and Fuller Theological Seminary that are facing similar challenges of trying to get rid of buildings because they just don't have enough people to support the giant budgets and the giant expenditure and overhead that buildings present to them. Earlier this year, Trinity was forced to slash its budget and eliminate many, many faculty positions. Just what I was talking about before with me personally. In 2018, Fuller closed 3 of its satellite campuses and voted to sell the property in Pasadena, California. And It was trying to relocate, but it was blocked, and at this point is not able to relocate. So the financial future of Fuller is in question. I can say that the seminary that I personally attended, Bethel, closed 2 or 3 of its campuses over the last few years as well, citing financial concerns of moving most things online. As noted in Christianity Today, many seminaries are facing declining enrollment with the declining birth rates and increased secularization of the United States. Christianity Today article goes on and says there are about 4 million fewer people in Generation Z than in the millennial generation, and 44% of those born after 1996 don't identify with a religious tradition. We've talked about this before. This is the spiritual but not religious. People just may have some concept of some kind of spiritual things, but they don't want mainline religion, and especially they don't want Christianity. The article goes on to say only about a quarter of those under 26 attend a religious service at all. That's a really low number, and that's what we're seeing. The kids, the youth, just don't care about God. Or that's really not even a fair statement. Many of them care about God. It's just, which God are we talking about? And are we talking about the actual God? I saw a picture of one Bible college with a whole poster. I didn't clip this, but it had a whole poster of all of the different religions and how they were all basically the same. This was a Bible college promoting that all religions are the same. I am not going to get into all the apologetics of that, but the bottom line is, no, they're not all the same. And they're, in fact, at odds with each other. Just ask a Muslim about Christianity, or ask a Mormon about Christianity, or ask a Hindu about Islam. I mean, there's a lot of differences here, and you can't just say they're all the same. I know some of you would say, well, there's that coexist sticker spelled out with all of the different symbols for all of the different religions, so it must all be the same, right? No, it's just not all the same. It's not all the same. And again, some are vastly at odds with one another and don't believe the other should exist. Or at the very least, the eschatology, right? The end goal of these religions is vastly different. And at the very least, you can say that. And so that's the problem, that you can't conflate all of these together. But the bigger problem is when a Christian institution that was established as a Christian institution goes back and says, well, besides Christianity, all these other ways are probably fine too. That's just textbook pluralism where all roads lead to God, which, again, when we put things in Christian perspective, biblical worldview, that's just not the Bible. When Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, in John, that's kind of what he means. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. That's a fairly narrow way. And Jesus talks about the wide way and the narrow way. He doesn't say, well, I'm a way to God, and there's many other ways, and maybe go and check out Buddha and all these other ways, because they're good too. That one's not in the Bible. Sorry, you can go. I mean, you pause the video if you want and go check and find the place where Jesus says all the ways are good ways. Just pick one and you'll be fine. Yeah, again, I'll just save you a little trouble. That one's not in there. But I can tell you, I see that argument a lot in all of the worlds, in all of the different internet places. There, people will say, well, yeah, Jesus just meant that there's a lot of different ways, and all the ways are good ways. Again, spoiler alert on that one. Yeah, that's not in the Bible. That's not Jesus. That's not God. He, in fact, says the other thing. God says he is a jealous God. God says you shall have no other gods before him. Kind of one of the big commandments there. So these are the things that I want us to know and understand. Again, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to follow after God. That's your choice, and that's between you and God. But if you say you do follow after Jesus, if you say you do follow after God, then you have to take God at his word, or you're just not following after God. I mean, this is where you get into this, like, quote unquote, hypocritical place where you say, well, I believe in God and I follow Jesus, but I'm not going to actually believe in God and follow Jesus. And that's where Jesus says things to us like, why do you say you believe me and you love me, but not do what I say? Those are the words of Jesus, and they're appropriate words. So choose this day. Do you want to serve God? Do you not? Anyway, I got off on a tangent because I do that sometimes, but it's important for us to understand that following after God, if you choose to do it, uh, gives you a certain path, and you either choose to walk that path or you don't. So we're talking about higher education. We're talking about seminaries. And here's some more from the Christianity Today article. Evangelical seminaries are grappling with the tensions and divisions within evangelicalism. It's kind of what I was talking about. They've struggled to maintain the trust of churches, donors, prospective seminarians amid polarizing arguments over race and gender and abuse and sexuality and political choices of the 2010s and 2020s. Yes, yes, they have. I mean, that's very clear. That's very clear. That's what's going on, and that people just really don't believe in the God of the Bible. And so, why would you go to a seminary where you learn about the God of the Bible? Instead, you might go to one of these other places. So, what we're going to look at now is a place called this is called Augsburg University, and it is a Lutheran university. You may or may not heard of Augsburg University. I hadn't heard of it before, and there's a lot of universities. But here's the deal, and here's where I want to start with this actually. Augsburg University, and this is why this is important, and personally important to me, and it's interesting to me because Augsburg University was started as a Norwegian Lutheran church. And of course, I have a great Norwegian name, so I know that's my name only, and I don't have any other connection to Norway. But when I find things like this, I think they're interesting. Anyway, Augsburg University was, according to their website, the first seminary founded by Norwegian Lutherans in America, named after the Confession of Faith. That's the Augsburg Confession. It's a great confession. You should go read it. Presented by Lutherans in Augsburg, Germany in 1530. Augsburg as a school opened in 1869 in Marshall, Wisconsin, and moved to Minneapolis in 1872. The seminarians were enrolled in 1874, and the first graduation was in 1879. So this institution has a long history of what? Training people to learn about Bible. I've talked about this so many times, like basically every college in America, and it's not 100%, but many, high percentage of colleges in America, almost every single one of these big and old colleges were started as a divinity school to train people how to teach the Bible to other people. This is no exception. So when I see this story where in the commencement speech of Augsburg University for this year, they turn to the Bible? No, they turn to the Quran. I, yeah, let's just watch this.
Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you. Congratulations, graduates. I'd like to do a verse from the Quran, the chapter opening of the Quran Fatiha. First, I'll read it in Arabic and then English. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم.
Okay, we don't need to hear the rest of that. I mean, you get the idea. But my point is this: that was that was the part of the commencement speech of Augsburg University, which is a Lutheran school that was started by Norwegian Lutherans, named after the Augsburg Confession of Faith, the Confession of Faith that cites Jesus Christ as the source of all, and now we're quoting the Quran because it's the same, right? The Quran is the same as the Bible, right? There's no difference between them. They don't argue with each other. They don't have different views of theology and eschatology, like end times or how you get to heaven. They're the same, right? I mean, Muhammad is the same as Jesus, right? I mean, those are wait, they're not? No, they're not the same. Oh, sorry. I'm just understanding now that actually the Bible and the Quran are not the same book, and they don't say the same thing, and they don't have the same theology, and they don't have the same philosophy, and they don't have the same end goal. Oh, so maybe at a Lutheran college, quoting the Quran is not the way to go? I mean, why is this not obvious? Like, why does this? And I don't have any hate for this person. If they want to be a Muslim, okay, great, go be a Muslim. I don't really care. I can pray for their soul and think that they're maybe not totally illuminated on the realities of God, but but do you stand that person up to represent the college in its commencement saying, here students, you have graduated, now go out into the world and change the world. And the source text that you say you should go out and change the world in this address is, at a Lutheran college, the Quran. Does anybody see this? Am I the only one that sees, like, hey, maybe that's not what a Lutheran should go and do to influence the world? I'll read you this right here. I think this is very interesting. This is from Augsburg College, and this is some of the main goals as they started this institution. And I know it was more than 100 years ago, so I know things change in 100 years. But if you start a thing, one would think that's the goal. Anyway, so in 1874, they proposed, this is just reading from their website about Augsburg, they proposed a 3-part plan: train ministerial candidates, prepare future theological students, and educate the farmer, worker, and businessman. The statement stressed that a good education is practical, and the practical is education for service. That was their goal, their motto: education for service, because they wanted people to go out and serve the community in a Christian education and proclamation model. So, to do this, let's cite the Quran. I mean, again, I'm beating this to death, but it just is one of these things where I just, when I come across stories like this, I get really confused. I get really confused. Okay, so let's do one more quick story, and this story is about, this is a good story because I wanna not just do crazy stories, but this is a good story. This is about Grove City. Let me just pull this up here. And so this is about Grove City, and Grove City has been under a little bit of fire because they had some illustrations of some critical race theory and a course that said, hey, we're going to have you read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, or White Fragility by D'Angelo, and studying those with seriousness. And so they pushed back and they said, hey, we're not going to do this. And they pushed back to say, we're going to have more conservative and conservative values, and we're going to push back into the goal of teaching people and you can have liberal education in terms of, you can have an education that teaches classics and teaches good values, but you also have to guard what you teach. And all of the things that you teach equally valuable? And the reality is, no, they're not. And you have to decide which things you're going to teach or how you're going to teach them. Are you going to present critical race theory as a be-all, end-all that will solve all of the world's problems and create a paradise on earth, which is what it says within it? Those aren't even my words. That is how you get to the preferred future. The preferred reality is following these tenets. Or instead, do you say, hey, this is a theory, but it is not compatible with Christianity? And those are the differences, right? How do you teach something? How do you teach it as a topic that is great and worthy of value and merit? Or do you teach something that is going to be destructive? And you can say, hey, you should know about this, and you just need to know that it is going to be destructive and it's going to be a problem, so you change it. So I just want to highlight and thank Grove City for standing up against some of this ridiculousness. And that's where, when I see an institution that says, sure, just read the Quran for a commencement speech at a Lutheran institution, because who cares, right? What difference does it make? Just read whatever book you want. Why not read Nietzsche? Because Nietzsche has some great words on how we killed God. Like, that sounds good for a Lutheran commencement speech. Like, obviously not. Now, I've read Nietzsche, and you probably should read Nietzsche, because it's important to understand the philosophy of our day. And he had a lot of influence in how we think about God today. But is he somebody that you should emulate and say, this is how we should think about God? No, probably not. Like that's probably not the way to go. But can you read it? Sure. And that's where, again, like there are certain things that you can read and study, and you should know what what they say and what they mean. But also, they're not the thing that you emulate and form your whole life around. Like, I don't know why this isn't obvious, but sometimes I just have to say obvious things so that we get them into reality and say, like, hey, maybe following after Jesus should be following after Jesus. Maybe when Jesus says, deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow after me, we should just do that. And instead of saying, well, yeah, but the Quran says some cool things about how to live in this life. Sure, maybe. I don't necessarily agree with that, but apparently people do, and say that every religion has value and every literature has value. And again, we're back to the beginning. We've gone full circle where all roads lead to God. And that is just the mantra of this culture. That's the mantra of this age. And really, it's not, because then you get to what we talked about a couple of days ago, that my truth is my truth and your truth is your truth. And when you're talking to me, you're like, well, I don't believe there is truth and I don't believe in your truth, but you have to absolutely believe in my truth, or you're kicked out of sports, or you're kicked out of the school, or you're kicked out of wherever. So there really is truth. There really is absolute truth. They just want it to be theirs and not yours. And I'm going to defer to the older truth. I'm going to defer to the tried and tested truth, and I'm going to defer to the truth of God in the Bible, because I believe that has been proven. I know not everybody agrees with me, and that's fine. You can test God yourself. You can follow after God yourself. You can seek after God yourself. I actually hope you do that. I hope you do grab your Bible and read it yourself, and you study who God is and his relationship to you. That's actually what I hope you do. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take anybody's word for it. That's the beauty of your relationship with God, is pick up your Bible and just read it, because all of the truth is there. And if we follow after God, he will reveal to us what we need to do and how to live. It's really there, black and white and red letters. So just one more thing. I think in this Christianity Today article, it tells you the answer, but it didn't mean to. And here's what I mean. It says, when it's talking about Gordon Conwell School of Theology and a couple of the other ones, it says that these institutions both started in urban Baptist churches. And in the article, it's just a throwaway line just to give you a little bit of history and just tell you kind of where these started and now where they're going with selling their locations and trying to figure out new locations and figuring out what the next steps are. But I really think that kernel is the piece. I think that kernel is the piece that answers the question, because I always want to come back to, why does this matter? What are we doing? What's the point of this? Why do I even talk about this? What do we do? And I think that's the important thing. The important question is, what is next, and what do we do? What is the path forward here? Because there has to be a path forward. We can't just hide away in our houses and just pretend that none of this is going on. We can't stop learning and say no learning should happen or no institutions are good. There have to be good ones. And I highlighted Grove City as one that is fighting against some of the different worldly ideologies that are coming into play in education. So you can look out for those, and I'll try to highlight them when I see it. But the path forward is the path back, and I think this statement actually answers that question. These institutions started in Baptist churches. These institutions started in churches. That's the bottom line. That's the real value. As I mentioned at the beginning, almost all of the big name institutions that we have today that have gone off the cliff, but at one point they were started with the express goal of training ministers. And they were started out of churches, or they were started out of communities where the community said, we really need to train people how to teach other people about God and teach the Bible and teach theology. So they started these places to help people teach theology. And it looks to me like many of these institutions are either broken or defunct or rotten from the inside. And I don't know if I can trust them to really teach Bible, really teach how to teach, uh, theology and Bible to the masses. I just don't know. It seems like there's such brokenness in these institutions that do we need to figure out a way where churches lead from within and send people out and train people from within? Maybe. I don't know. I don't have all the answers in this, but I just know that we need to learn. We need to learn what the Bible says. We need to learn good theology and how to apply it in and around our lives and our families and our communities and beyond. And we need to do that in a way that maintains a biblical standard and doesn't just go off the cliff because the rest of the culture is. So this is what I'm trying to figure out. This is what we're trying to figure out in my small little way. I'm doing that with this podcast. I try to give you news and biblical theology from a Christian worldview because I think that's what we need. I think we need more of it. I am disheartened by a generation that was not given enough theology to where when they come across stories in the news, when they come across hard issues, they just don't know what to deal with it. My friends that I've grown up with don't know what to deal with it. Friends that went with me to seminary, friends that went to other Bible colleges have left the faith because they come across these hard theological questions, and somehow through their church experience, through their Bible college experience, even through their Bible seminary experience, they've not been equipped with the actual answers, the actual theological ideas of how to deal with these hard questions. And it really just makes me sad. But we have to figure out how then are we going to get into these institutions and change them or create new institutions from churches and create places where people can actually learn Bible and actually learn theology that is from the Bible, not from the culture, because the culture is going to catechize you. That's a big word to say. The culture is going to make you look like whatever it wants you to look like. They're going to tell you what's right. They're going to tell you what's wrong. And they're going to mandate that you follow them into it unless you have enough boldness and courage and sometimes disobedience to this culture to say, I'm going to not follow the culture. I'm going to follow God regardless of the circumstances. And that's really where we start and where we end today. What are you going to do? Are you going to serve God, or are you going to serve the culture? Because it's easier. It's a lot easier to just say, sure, let's follow the Quran as a Lutheran institution. Why wouldn't we? Because all roads lead to God. Or you can say, hey, that seems a little weird to me. Maybe we should just read the Bible and do what it says. Maybe we should just listen to the words of Jesus and do what he tells us to do. Maybe we should read the Bible and apply it to our lives. That seems like a pretty good way to be a biblical Christian. Read the Bible, do what it says. Sounds super simple. It's a little bit more difficult in practice, but really the baseline is just that. Read the Bible, do what it says. I hope that you can do that. I hope that you follow after God. If this has been helpful to you, share it with a friend, text it out, email it out. If not, just delete your phone and throw it in the trash because it's not worth anything anyway. No, I'm just kidding, but thank you for joining Church Public today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and as always, keep the faith.